What a beautiful wedding, Luke. Sadly, I'll need to reveal our little secret now.
What the?
Yo, what she's doing here?
Is that your ex? Is she pregnant?
The microphone trembled in Janelle's hands as she stared across the wedding guests at the man who had vanished from her life without a trace. Luke Hastings stood frozen at the altar in his $1,000 suit, his face draining of color as recognition hit like a lightning bolt. 4 months ago, he had whispered promises of forever in her ear. Now he was seconds away from saying, "I do," to another woman. But Janelle carried a secret that would shatter this perfect Charleston wedding into a million pieces. A truth so explosive it would either destroy them both or give them the second chance they never saw coming. As the reverend asked if anyone objected to this union, Janelle made the choice that would change 3 lives forever. What she revealed next would spark a scandal that no amount of old Southern money could buy their way out of. If you're ready to see how this love story unfolds, hit that subscribe button and tell me what city you're watching from. I love connecting with viewers from around the world. The morning sun painted Charleston's historic district in golden light. Magnolia trees stood like gentle guardians along the cobblestone paths of the Hastings estate. White roses climbed up garden trellises while Spanish moss swayed in the warm breeze. Everything looked perfect for a wedding. Janelle Brooks adjusted the microphone stand on the small outdoor stage. Her black dress was simple but elegant. She'd borrowed it from her sister Tasha, who said it made her look professional and pretty. The other musicians in her band were setting up their instruments nearby. The violin player tuned his strings. The pianist ran through a few scales. "You nervous?" asked Marcus, the drummer. His voice was friendly but concerned. Janelle shook her head. Just another wedding gig. But her hands were shaking slightly as she organized her sheet music. She needed this job. The rent was due in 3 days, and her savings account was almost empty. The wedding planner, a thin woman with perfectly styled blonde hair, clicked across the lawn in high heels. "The ceremony starts in 20 minutes, she announced. "Remember, you'll sing during the processional, then Ave Maria during the signing, and At Last for the recessional." Janelle nodded. She'd sung these songs 100 times before. Weddings were her specialty. She had a voice that made people cry happy tears. It was a gift, her grandmother used to say. A gift meant to celebrate love. Guests began arriving in elegant cars. Women in pastel dresses and wide-brimmed hats stepped carefully across the grass. Men in navy suits and bow ties looked comfortable in their wealth. This was old Charleston money, the kind of family that had streets named after them. Janelle's phone buzzed. A text from Tasha. "Break a leg, sis. Make that money." She smiled and put her phone away. Her little sister always knew how to make her feel better. Tasha was studying at the community college and working nights at a diner. They both knew what it meant to work hard for every dollar. The wedding planner returned, this time with a program in her hand. "Here's the order of service," she said. "The groom's name is Luke Hastings. The bride is Clara Devine. Luke Hastings." The program slipped from Janelle's fingers and fluttered to the ground. Her heart stopped beating for a moment. Then it started again, much too fast. Luke Hastings. The same Luke who used to bring her coffee at the music store where she worked part-time. The Luke who would sit in the back row when she performed at open mic nights. The Luke who told her she had the most beautiful voice he'd ever heard. The Luke who had whispered, "I love you," in her ear exactly 4 months and 2 days ago. "Are you all right?" The wedding planner was staring at her with sharp eyes. "I'm fine," Janelle's voice came out as a croak. She cleared her throat. "Just need some water." She walked quickly toward the house, her legs feeling weak. In the kitchen, she splashed cold water on her face and looked at herself in the reflection of the window. Her dark skin had gone pale. Her usually bright eyes looked scared. This couldn't be happening. Luke was getting married, to someone else, and she was here to sing at his wedding like some kind of cruel joke. 4 months ago, they had spent the night together. It was supposed to be their beginning, not their end. He had held her close and talked about the future, about traveling together, about the little house they could buy near the water. "I'll call you," he had said when she left his apartment that morning, but he never called, not once. She had texted him 3 times, left 2 voicemails. Nothing. It was like she had dreamed the whole thing. Now she knew why. He was planning a wedding to Clara Devine. Janelle's phone rang. The wedding planner's voice was sharp through the speaker. "We need you on stage now." She could run. She could walk out the back door, get in her old Honda, and drive away. But she needed this money. Her landlord had already given her one extension, and there was something else she needed to tell Luke, something important, something that would change everything. She walked back to the stage on unsteady legs. The guests were seated in white chairs arranged in perfect rows. An archway of roses marked the altar. The photographer moved around like a dancer, capturing every detail. Then she saw him. Luke stood at the altar in a perfectly fitted grey suit. His dark hair was styled just the way she remembered. His hands were clasped in front of him. He looked nervous but handsome, very handsome. Next to him stood his best man, a tall guy she didn't recognize. The groomsmen lined up beside them, all looking like they'd stepped out of a magazine. Janelle picked up her microphone. Her hand was trembling. The wedding march began. The bridesmaids walked down the aisle in soft pink dresses, smiling and holding small bouquets. Then came the maid of honor, a woman with perfect posture and an even more perfect smile. Finally, Clara appeared at the back of the aisle. She was beautiful in the way that money could make someone beautiful. Her dress probably cost more than Janelle made in 3 months. Her smile was confident and bright. She walked toward Luke like she owned the world, and maybe she did. Janelle began to sing. "Here comes the bride, all dressed in white." Her voice was strong and clear, even though her heart was breaking into pieces. Luke's eyes found hers across the crowd of guests. She watched his face change. First confusion, then recognition, then something that looked like panic. She kept singing. What else could she do? The music carried her voice across the garden. The guests smiled and dabbed at their eyes with handkerchiefs. Clara beamed as she took her place beside Luke at the altar. But Luke wasn't looking at his bride. He was staring at Janelle like he'd seen a ghost. The reverend, an older black man with kind eyes and grey hair, opened his book. "Dearly beloved," he began, "we are gathered here today to join Luke and Clara in holy matrimony." Janelle finished the processional song and sat down on the small stool beside her microphone stand. She was supposed to wait for the signing portion of the ceremony, but she couldn't stop looking at Luke, and he couldn't stop looking at her. Memory after memory flooded back. The way he laughed at her jokes, how he would request the same song every time she performed "At Last" by Etta James. The night he cooked dinner for her in his apartment, burning the chicken but making her laugh until her sides hurt. The way he kissed her, soft and sweet, like she was precious. The way he looked at her when he said, "I've never felt this way about anyone before." "If anyone has a reason why these two should not be wed," the reverend continued, "speak now or forever hold your peace." The garden fell silent. A bird chirped in a nearby tree. Someone coughed quietly. Janelle stood up. She didn't plan to. Her body just moved on its own. The microphone was still in her hand from the earlier song. Her voice carried across the silent crowd. "I do," she said clearly. "I have a reason." Gasps echoed across the garden. Heads turned toward her. Clara's face went white. Luke's mouth fell open. Janelle's heart was beating so hard she thought it might burst out of her chest, but she had come too far to stop now. "Luke," she said, her voice shaking but determined, "before you say 'I do,' I need to tell you something." Clara grabbed Luke's arm. "What is this?" she hissed. Luke stood frozen, staring at Janelle like she was the only person in the world. "I'm pregnant," Janelle said. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. "And the baby is yours." The explosion came all at once. Women gasped and covered their mouths. Men stood up in their chairs. Someone dropped their program. A glass fell and shattered on the stone pathway. Clara screamed. Not words, just a sound of pure fury and shock. "Security!" shouted a woman from the front row. She had silver hair and cold eyes, and she looked exactly like Luke, but older and meaner. This had to be his mother. "Get this person away from my son." 2 men in dark suits started walking toward the stage, but Luke held up his hand. "Wait," he said. His voice was hoarse and confused. "Just wait." He walked toward Janelle, leaving Clara standing alone at the altar. The guests watched in stunned silence. Cameras flashed as the photographer tried to capture every moment of the drama. "Is it true?" Luke asked when he reached the stage. His face was pale, but his eyes were intense and searching. Janelle reached into her small purse with shaking fingers. She pulled out a folded piece of paper and handed it to him. It was a doctor's report, dated 6 weeks ago. At the top, in clear black letters, it said, "Positive pregnancy test." Luke stared at the paper for a long moment. His hands were shaking now too. "The timing," he started to say. 4 months and 3 days ago," Janelle whispered. "Your apartment. You made me breakfast the next morning. Burnt toast and perfect coffee." His face crumpled. He remembered. Clara had marched over to them, her white dress rustling with each angry step. "This is ridiculous," she shouted. "She's lying. She's trying to ruin our wedding." "Clara, please," Luke started. "No." Clara's perfect makeup was starting to run with angry tears. "I won't let nobody destroy what we have." The woman who must be Luke's mother had also approached. She looked at Janelle with pure disgust. "How much do you want?" she asked coldly. "Excuse me?" Janelle blinked in confusion. "How much money will it take to make you go away?" The question hit Janelle like a slap across the face. "This isn't about money." "Everything is about money, dear," the older woman said with a cruel smile. "Name your price." Luke looked between his mother and Janelle, his face torn with confusion and pain. "Mom, stop. Let me handle this." "You've already handled enough," his mother snapped. "Look at this mess." The security guards had reached them now. One of them, a large man with gentle eyes, looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am," he said to Janelle, "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Janelle looked around at all the faces staring at her. Some looked angry, some looked curious, a few looked sympathetic. She saw the reverend watching with concern, his Bible still open in his hands. "Luke," she said one more time, "I tried to call you. I tried to tell you. But someone," she looked pointedly at his mother, "someone made sure you never got my messages." Luke's head snapped toward his mother. "What is she talking about?" His mother's face didn't change expression. "I have no idea. The girl is obviously disturbed." But Janelle saw something flicker in the woman's eyes, something that looked like guilt. The security guard gently took Janelle's arm. "Come on," he said, kindly. "Let's go." She nodded and followed him toward the parking area. Behind her, she could hear Clara crying and guests murmuring in shocked voices. She heard Luke call her name once, but she didn't turn around. Her old Honda sat in the employees' parking area behind the big house. She got inside and sat for a moment with her hands on the steering wheel. Her whole body was shaking. She had just blown up a wedding, in front of hundreds of people. The story would be in the newspapers by tomorrow. Her name would be attached to this scandal forever. But she had done it for her baby, the baby growing inside her that Luke didn't even know about until 5 minutes ago. She had done it because every child deserved a father who knew they existed. She started the engine and drove away from the Hastings estate, leaving behind the chaos and the broken wedding and the man she still loved, despite everything. Behind her, Luke watched her car disappear through the front gates. Clara was still crying. His mother was barking orders at the staff. The guests were slowly starting to leave, whispering among themselves. But Luke just stood there, holding the pregnancy test results in his hand and wondering how his life had just completely changed in the space of 5 minutes. The reverend approached him quietly. "Son," he said gently, "are you all right?" Luke looked at the older man with lost eyes. "Reverend Cole," he said, "I think I just made the biggest mistake of my life." "Which mistake?" the reverend asked. "The one 4 months ago, or the one you were about to make today?" Luke had no answer for that. The sun was still shining. The roses still smelled sweet. But the perfect wedding was over, and nothing would ever be the same again. Janelle sat in her beat-up Honda in the parking lot of a gas station 5 miles from the Hastings estate. Her hands were still shaking as she gripped the steering wheel. What had she just done? Her phone buzzed with a text from Tasha. "How did the gig go? Did you make those rich folks cry happy tears?" Janelle stared at the message. How could she even begin to explain what had just happened? She turned off her phone and started driving home. The small apartment she shared with Tasha was in a part of Charleston that tourists never saw. Old buildings that needed paint, narrow streets with potholes. But it was home, and right now she needed to be somewhere safe. She climbed the stairs to the second floor, her legs feeling like jelly. The key turned in the lock just as Tasha opened the door from the inside. "Girl, you look like you've seen a ghost," Tasha said. She was still in her diner uniform, her natural hair pulled back in a colorful headband. "What happened?" Janelle walked into their tiny living room and collapsed on the old couch they'd bought at a yard sale. "I ruined a wedding. You what now?" Tasha sat down beside her. The groom was Luke. Tasha's eyes went wide. "Luke? You're Luke? The one who ghosted you after that amazing night you wouldn't stop talking about?" Janelle nodded miserably. "He was marrying some rich girl named Clara. I was there to sing. And I told everyone about the baby." "Oh, honey." Tasha pulled her into a hug. "You told him? In front of everyone?" "I had to. I couldn't let him get married without knowing he was going to be a father." Tears started flowing down Janelle's cheeks. "But Tasha, you should have seen his mother's face." She looked at me like I was dirt on her shoe. "Forget his mother," Tasha said fiercely. "You did the right thing. That man needed to know about his child." "Did I, though? Maybe I should have found another way. Maybe I should have—" "No." Tasha's voice was firm. "You tried the quiet way. You called him. You texted him. He ignored you. Sometimes people don't listen until you make them listen." Janelle's phone started ringing. Unknown number. Then another call. Another unknown number. She turned it off completely. "The reporters are already calling," she said with dread. Meanwhile, back at the Hastings estate, Luke stood in his childhood bedroom, still wearing his wedding suit. The tie hung loose around his neck. His hair was messed up from running his hands through it. The house was finally quiet. The guests had all gone home. The catering staff had packed up the untouched wedding cake. Clara had left in tears with her parents, throwing her engagement ring at Luke's feet before getting into their Bentley. Now it was just Luke, his mother Margaret, and the mess they had to clean up. Margaret knocked on his door. "Luke, we need to talk." He didn't answer, but she came in anyway. She had changed out of her formal dress into a sharp business suit. Even in crisis, Margaret Hastings looked like she was ready to take over the world. "This can still be fixed," she said, sitting in the chair by his desk. "Our lawyers can handle it quietly. A financial settlement, a non-disclosure agreement. By next week, this will all be forgotten." Luke looked at her like she was speaking a foreign language. "A settlement? Mom, she's having my baby." "She claims she's having your baby," Margaret corrected. "We have no proof. I saw the doctor's report. The timing matches." Luke's voice was getting louder. "And why would she lie? What could she possibly gain from this? Money, obviously. Fame. Her 15 minutes in the spotlight." Margaret's voice was cold and practical. "These people, Luke, they see our family name, and they see dollar signs." "These people?" Luke stood up, anger flashing in his eyes. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You know exactly what I mean. She's not our kind. She doesn't belong in our world." Luke stared at his mother for a long moment. "You blocked her calls, didn't you?" Margaret's face didn't change. "I have no idea what you're talking about. My assistant Derek handles my personal phone." "You had him block her number." "Derek follows my instructions when it comes to protecting this family." "Protecting this family?" Luke's voice cracked with disbelief. "From what? From the woman I love?" The words hung in the air between them. Margaret's face went very still. "Love," she said quietly. "Luke, you don't even know this girl. I know her better than I've ever known anyone." Luke's voice was passionate now. "She's kind and funny and talented. She works 3 jobs to pay for her sister's college. She volunteers at the children's hospital on weekends. She makes the best cornbread I've ever tasted, and she cries during romantic movies even when she tries to hide it." Margaret listened to this list with growing horror. "How long has this been going on?" 6 months. We met at the music store downtown. I kept going back just to hear her sing." Luke's voice got soft. "She didn't know who I was at first. She liked me for me, not for my last name or my bank account." "And then what happened? Why didn't you bring her to meet us?" Luke looked away. "Because I was scared. Scared of what you would think. Scared of what people would say. Scared that maybe I wasn't good enough for her." Margaret stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the catering staff was loading the last of the tables into a truck. "Clara's father called," she said, without turning around. "They're considering a lawsuit for public humiliation." "Let them sue," Luke said. I'll countersue for the therapy bills I'm going to need after today." Despite herself, Margaret almost smiled. "This isn't a joke, Luke. Your reputation is everything in this business. The foundation, your board position, your future in politics, it could all be ruined." "Maybe it should be," Luke said quietly. "Maybe I've been living the wrong life anyway." Margaret turned to look at her son. For a moment, he looked just like he had when he was 5 years old, asking her why his father was never home for dinner. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe it's time I figured out what I actually want, instead of what everyone else expects me to want." That evening, Janelle sat at the small table in her kitchen, staring at a bowl of soup that had gone cold. Tasha was at work, pulling the night shift at the diner. The apartment felt too quiet and too loud at the same time. Her phone, which she had finally turned back on, showed 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Most were from reporters. A few were from friends who had seen the story online. One was from Nina, her boss at the music agency. She opened Nina's text with dread. "Janelle, we need to talk. Come in tomorrow morning." She knew what that meant. The music agency couldn't afford to be associated with scandal. Wedding singers were supposed to be invisible, professional, and drama-free. She had been the opposite of all three. There was one more text, from a number she didn't recognize. "This is Luke. Can we talk? Please." Janelle stared at the message for a long time. Then she deleted it, without responding. She walked to the bathroom and looked at herself in the mirror. Her makeup was smeared from crying. Her borrowed dress was wrinkled. She looked like exactly what people would expect from someone who had crashed a high-society wedding. But when she put her hand on her stomach, she felt something else. Strength. She had protected her baby today. She had made sure her child would have a father who knew they existed. Whatever happened next, she had done the right thing. The next morning brought a new kind of nightmare. Janelle woke up to find photographers camped outside her apartment building. Someone had leaked her address to the media. "Charleston wedding singer drops baby bomb," read the headline in the local paper. The story included a photo of her from her music agency's website next to a photo of Luke from some charity gala. They looked like they came from different planets. Tasha came home just as Janelle was trying to figure out how to get to her car without being photographed. "Those vultures have been out there since 5 in the morning," Tasha said, peeking through the blinds. "Mrs. Rodriguez downstairs is furious. She says they're bothering her cats." "I need to get to Nina's office," Janelle said. "I'm probably about to get fired." "Want me to create a distraction?" Tasha asked. "I could go out there and start singing show tunes. That might confuse them long enough for you to sneak out the back." "Despite everything," Janelle smiled, "what would I do without you?" "You'd manage," Tasha said, "but you'd be a lot more boring." An hour later, Janelle sat in Nina's small office above a music store on King Street. Nina was a woman in her 40s who had been booking local musicians for 20 years. She had given Janelle her first professional gig and had been like a mother to her ever since. "Honey," Nina said, pouring coffee into 2 mismatched mugs, "I'm not going to lie to you. This is bad." "How bad?" "3 of my biggest clients have called this morning. They don't want to book any of my artists for fear of getting dragged into drama." Nina sat down across from Janelle. "I've got to suspend you for a while." "Just until this blows over." Janelle nodded. She had expected this. "I understand. But," Nina continued, "I want you to know that what you did took guts. Maybe it wasn't the smartest thing, but it took guts. And that little baby is lucky to have a mama who will fight for them." Tears started in Janelle's eyes again. "Thanks, Nina. That means everything. You take care of yourself. You hear? And if you need anything at all, you call me." Janelle left Nina's office through the back door to avoid the reporters who had followed her there. She walked the long way home, taking side streets and cutting through parks. Charleston looked different today. The beautiful historic buildings and tree-lined streets felt like they belonged to someone else's life. When she finally made it back to her apartment, there was an eviction notice taped to her door. She read it twice before the words sank in. Mr. Patterson, her landlord, was giving her 30 days to move out. The reason listed was creating disturbances that disrupt other tenants. The photographers were disrupting other tenants, but the photographers were there because of her. Janelle crumpled the notice in her fist and went inside. She sat on her couch and let herself cry, really cry, for the first time since yesterday. She cried for her job and her home and her reputation. She cried for the fairy tale ending she had imagined with Luke that was never going to happen. She cried for her baby, who would grow up in this mess she had created. But mostly, she cried because she felt so alone. That evening, Luke sat in his car outside Janelle's apartment building. He had been there for 2 hours, trying to work up the courage to go upstairs. The reporters had finally left, but he could see lights on in her apartment window. He had driven by 3 times that day, always finding some reason not to stop. His phone had 17 unread text messages from Clara and 43 from various board members and business associates. His mother had left 6 voicemails, each one more urgent than the last. But all he could think about was the look on Janelle's face when she saw him at the altar. The shock and hurt and heartbreak. He had put that look there by disappearing from her life without explanation. He got out of the car and walked to the front door of her building. The directory showed J. Brooks, 2B. He pressed the buzzer and waited. "Hello?" Her voice came through the intercom, cautious and tired. "Janelle, it's Luke. Please, can we talk?" There was a long silence. Then, "Go away, Luke. Please. Just 5 minutes. I need to explain." "Explain what? How you blocked my calls? How you left me wondering what I did wrong? How you got engaged to someone else while I was trying to figure out how to tell you about our baby?" Luke pressed his forehead against the cold metal of the intercom box. "I never got your calls. My mother. She had my assistant block your number. I didn't know." Another long silence. "I don't believe you," Janelle said finally. "I can prove it. I have the phone records. I can show you. It doesn't matter now," she said, and her voice sounded so tired. "Just go home to your mansion and your perfect life. Forget about me and forget about the baby. That's what you're good at. Janelle, please." The intercom went dead. Luke stood there for another 10 minutes, hoping she would change her mind. But the light in her apartment window went dark, and he knew she wasn't coming down. He drove home through the empty Charleston streets, past the parks where they used to walk together and the cafe where they had their first real conversation. Everything reminded him of her, and everything reminded him of how badly he had messed up. At his house, his mansion, as she had called it, he sat in his study with a glass of whiskey. He didn't really want. On his desk was the pregnancy test result she had given him at the wedding. Next to it was the engagement ring Clara had thrown at him. One represented the future he hadn't known he wanted. The other represented the future everyone else had planned for him. He picked up his phone and called his assistant. "Derek," he said, when the man answered, "we need to talk." The next morning, Luke sat across from Derek in his downtown office. His assistant looked uncomfortable, shifting in his chair and avoiding eye contact. The phone records were spread across the desk between them like evidence at a trial. "Just tell me the truth," Luke said quietly. "Did my mother ask you to block Janelle's calls?" Derek was a good man who had worked for the Hastings family for 5 years. He had a wife and 2 kids and needed this job. But looking at Luke's tired face, he couldn't lie anymore. "Yes," he said finally. "Mrs. Hastings said the girl was a distraction, that she would hurt your reputation and your engagement to Miss Devine." Luke felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. "How many calls?" 7 phone calls, 12 text messages. Derek's voice got smaller. "The last one came 2 weeks ago," she sounded. "She sounded upset, Mr. Hastings. She said she had something important to tell you." Luke put his head in his hands. While Janelle was trying desperately to reach him, probably scared and alone with her pregnancy, he was picking out flowers for his wedding to another woman. "I'm sorry," Derek said. "I should have told you, but your mother said—" "You're fired," Luke said without looking up. "Mr. Hastings, please." "No, Derek. You're not fired because you followed my mother's orders. You're fired because you knew it was wrong, and you did it anyway." Luke finally raised his head. His eyes were red with exhaustion and anger. "A woman was trying to tell me I was going to be a father, and you helped keep that from me." Derek left the office without another word. Luke sat alone, staring at the phone records. 7 calls, 12 text messages. He could only imagine how she must have felt, reaching out again and again into silence. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. "Board meeting at 2 p.m. We need to discuss damage control." Luke deleted the message without reading it twice. Meanwhile, across town, Janelle was packing her belongings into cardboard boxes. She had found a small studio apartment near the airport that she could barely afford. It wasn't much, one room with a tiny kitchen and a bathroom that had seen better days, but the landlord didn't care about her recent notoriety. Tasha sat on the floor, wrapping dishes in newspaper. "You know you can stay with me," she said for the 10th time. "Your place is barely big enough for one person," Janelle replied, folding clothes into a box. "Besides, I need to figure out how to do this on my own." "You don't have to do everything alone, Nella. That's what family is for." Janelle looked at her sister, really looked at her. Tasha was only 25, but she had an old soul and a fierce heart. She had dropped out of high school to help support them when their mother got sick. She had worked double shifts to help pay for Janelle's music lessons. She had never asked for anything in return. "What would I do without you?" Janelle asked softly. "Let's hope you never have to find out," Tasha said with a grin. That afternoon, Luke drove to the small cafe where Janelle had gotten a job singing on weekends. It was called Melodies, and it was nothing like the fancy venues where she used to perform for weddings. The walls were painted bright yellow, and local artwork hung in mismatched frames. But it felt warm and welcoming in a way that his mother's elegant parties never did. He sat at a corner table and ordered coffee he didn't want while he waited for her to arrive for her rehearsal. When she walked in through the front door, his heart jumped the same way it always had. She was wearing jeans and a simple blue sweater that brought out the warmth in her brown eyes. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she carried her guitar case over her shoulder. She looked beautiful and tired and strong all at once. She saw him immediately. Her steps faltered for a moment, but then she lifted her chin and walked to the small stage area without acknowledging him. Luke watched her set up her microphone and tune her guitar. Her movements were graceful and practiced. This was her element, her safe space. He felt like an intruder just being there. But he stayed. She began with a song he didn't recognize, something soft and sad about second chances and broken promises. Her voice filled the small cafe, and the few other customers stopped their conversations to listen. When she finished, Luke began to clap. She looked over at him for the first time, her expression unreadable. "Can I buy you a cup of coffee?" he called across the room. "I don't drink coffee anymore," she said simply. "Tea, then, or water, or whatever you want." Janelle looked around the cafe. The owner, Mrs. Chen, was watching from behind the counter with interested eyes. The other customers were starting to whisper. She sighed and walked over to Luke's table. "5 minutes," she said, sitting down across from him. "Then you leave me alone." Luke's heart was racing. Up close, he could see that she looked thinner than he remembered. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her hands had small cuts on them, probably from packing boxes. "I fired Derek," he said. "Good for you. Janelle, I swear to you, I never knew you called. My mother had him block your number from my phone." She studied his face for a long moment. "Why should I believe you?" Luke pulled out his phone and showed her the call log. "These are all the calls I received in the past 4 months. Your number isn't on here because I never saw them." Janelle looked at the screen, then back at his face. Something in her expression softened slightly. "Your mother must really hate me," she said quietly. "My mother hates anyone she thinks is a threat to her plans for my life." Luke's voice was bitter. "But it doesn't matter what she thinks. What matters is what I think, what I feel." "And what do you feel, Luke?" He reached across the table like he was going to take her hand, then stopped himself. "I feel like I've been sleepwalking for 4 months. Like I was living someone else's life and pretending it was mine. You were about to marry someone else. I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life," he said. "Clara, she's a nice person, but she's not you. She doesn't make me laugh until my sides hurt. She doesn't sing in the car or cry at dog commercials or make me want to be a better man." Despite herself, Janelle felt tears starting in her eyes. "Luke, I love you," he said simply. "I've loved you since the night you sang, at last, at that open mic, and looked right at me during the chorus. I've loved you since you told me your middle name was Hope, because your grandmother said everyone needed hope to survive. I've loved you since you fell asleep on my couch watching The Princess Bride, and I got to just sit there and watch you breathe." A tear rolled down Janelle's cheek. "Then why didn't you fight for me? When your mother decided I wasn't good enough, Why didn't you choose me? Luke's voice broke. Because I'm a coward. Because I was so used to letting other people make my decisions that I forgot I could make my own. He leaned forward. But I'm done being a coward, Janelle. I'm done living my mother's life instead of mine. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to be part of this baby's life. I want to be part of your life. If you'll let me. Janelle wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. It's not that simple, Luke. We can't just go back to the way things were. I know. We'll have to start over, build something new. He paused. But I want to try, if you're willing to give me a chance. Janelle looked around the cafe. Mrs. Chen was pretending to wipe down tables while obviously listening to every word. The other customers had given up any pretense of not staring. I need time to think, she said finally. Of course. Take all the time you need. And I have conditions. Anything. First, we go slow. Really slow. I'm not just thinking about me anymore. I'm thinking about this baby. Luke nodded eagerly. Second, no more lies. No more secrets. If your family has a problem with me, I want to know about it. Agreed. Third, you prove to me that you can stand up to your mother. Because if we do this, she's going to make our lives very difficult. Luke's jaw tightened. She already has. But you're right. It's time I had a conversation with her. Janelle stood up to leave. I'm moving into a new place tomorrow. Tasha has the address if you want to talk again. Janelle, wait. Luke stood up too. The baby, how are you feeling? Are you okay? Do you need anything? For the first time since he'd arrived, she smiled. A real smile that reached her eyes. I'm okay, she said softly. We're okay. I have a doctor's appointment next week. Would it be all right if I came with you? She hesitated. As the father, not as my boyfriend. As the father, he agreed. Just as the father. She nodded and walked toward the door. Before she left, she turned back. Luke, that song I was singing when you came in? I wrote it about you. About us. Then she was gone, leaving him alone in the bright yellow cafe with the taste of hope in his mouth. That evening, Luke sat in his mother's formal living room, surrounded by oil paintings of dead relatives and furniture that cost more than most people's cars. Margaret sat across from him, her spine perfectly straight, her hands folded in her lap. I'm disappointed in you, she said. Walking out of the board meeting was childish. I'm 30 years old, Mum. I can miss a meeting if I want to. Not when you're the heir to this family's legacy. Not when every decision you make reflects on our name. Margaret's voice was ice cold. That girl has already cost you your engagement. Don't let her cost you everything else. Her name is Janelle, and she's pregnant with your grandchild. Margaret waved a hand dismissively. Allegedly pregnant. We still haven't confirmed that. Luke pulled the ultrasound photo from his pocket and placed it on the coffee table between them. Does this look alleged to you? Margaret barely glanced at the photo. Ultrasounds can be faked. Jesus, Mom, listen to yourself. Luke stood up and began pacing. Even if you don't believe the pregnancy is real, even if you think Janelle is some kind of gold digger, how can you be so cold about this? Because someone in this family has to think clearly. Margaret snapped. You're letting your emotions cloud your judgment. My emotions? You mean my love for the woman who's carrying my child? Your infatuation with a girl who is completely wrong for you. Margaret's voice got louder. She's from a different world, Luke. Different class, different background, different values. It will never work. Different color, Luke said quietly. That's what you really mean, isn't it? Margaret's face went very still. That's not what I said. It's what you meant. Luke stopped pacing and looked at his mother with new eyes. All those subtle comments about our kind of people, and she doesn't belong in our world. You're talking about race. I'm talking about compatibility, about shared experiences and common ground. Janelle and I have more in common than Clara and I ever did, Luke said. We like the same music and the same movies. We both love to cook. We both think your charity galas are boring as hell. Despite the seriousness of the moment, Margaret almost smiled at that last part. Luke, she said, her voice softer now. I know you care about this girl, but caring isn't enough for a marriage. What happens when the novelty wears off? What happens when you realize you want different things? Then we'll figure it out together. Like couples do. Luke sat back down. Mom, I'm going to be in this child's life whether you like it or not. The question is whether you want to be in mine." Margaret looked at her son for a long moment. He looked like his father had at that age, stubborn and idealistic, and completely convinced he knew better than everyone else. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally. "I want you to apologize to Janelle for what you said at the wedding. I want you to stop interfering in my personal life. And I want you to really try to get to know her. And if I can't do those things—" Luke's voice was steady and sad. "Then I guess we'll see each other at holidays and board meetings, but you won't be part of your grandchild's life." Margaret felt something cold and sharp in her chest. The thought of losing her son was almost unbearable, but the thought of having a daughter-in-law who didn't fit into their world was nearly as bad. "I need time to think about this," she said. "Don't take too long, Mom. Some chances don't come twice." Luke left her sitting in the formal living room, surrounded by the portraits of ancestors who had probably faced similar choices between family expectations and personal happiness. He hoped she would choose better than they had. 3 weeks later, Janelle sat in the waiting room of Dr. Martinez's office, her hands folded over her growing belly. The morning sickness had finally started to ease, but she still felt nervous before each appointment. At 17 weeks pregnant, everything was becoming more real. The door opened, and Luke walked in. He looked around the small, cheerful waiting room with its magazine rack and children's toys scattered in the corner. This was nothing like the fancy medical offices his family usually visited. "Am I late?" he asked, sitting down in the chair next to hers. "Right on time," Janelle said. She noticed he was wearing jeans and a simple button-down shirt instead of his usual expensive suits. "You didn't have to dress down for me." Luke looked surprised. "I'm not dressing down. I'm dressing like myself." Over the past 3 weeks, they had been careful with each other. Luke would text to check on her, but not too often. He had brought groceries to her new apartment, but didn't stay long. They were learning how to be friends again before they could be anything more. Janelle Brooks, a nurse with kind eyes and grey hair, called from the doorway. They followed her back to the examination room. Janelle changed into the paper gown while Luke waited in the hallway. When she was ready, he came back in and sat in the chair beside the examination table. Dr. Martinez was a woman in her 50s with gentle hands and a warm smile. She had been taking care of women and babies in Charleston for 20 years, and nothing surprised her anymore. "How are you feeling?" she asked Janelle while preparing the ultrasound machine. "Better. The tiredness is getting easier." "Good. And how about you, Dad? Any questions?" Luke shifted in his chair. It was the first time anyone had called him Dad, and it made something warm spread through his chest. "Is she? Are they both healthy?" he asked. "Let's take a look," Dr. Martinez said, squeezing the cold gel onto Janelle's belly. The ultrasound image appeared on the screen, black and white and grainy. But there, in the center, was their baby. Much bigger now than in the earlier photos. You could see the shape of a head, tiny arms and legs. "Everything looks perfect, Doctor," Martinez said. "Good size, strong heartbeat. Would you like to know the sex?" Janelle looked at Luke. They had talked about this over text messages but hadn't decided. "What do you think?" she asked him. "Whatever you want," he said, but his voice was excited. "Okay," Janelle said to the doctor. "Tell us. Congratulations, you're having a little girl." Luke made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Janelle felt tears spring to her eyes. "A daughter," Luke whispered, staring at the screen. "Doctor." Martinez printed several copies of the ultrasound photo and handed them to the proud parents. "I'll see you in 4 weeks," she said. In the parking lot outside the medical building, Luke and Janelle sat in his car looking at the pictures. "She's so tiny," Janelle said softly. "But you can see her face," Luke said, wonder in his voice. "Look, she has your nose." "She has your stubborn chin," Janelle replied. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both thinking about the reality of becoming parents. "Janelle," Luke said finally, "I want to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me." "Okay. Are you happy? About the baby, I mean. Not about the situation, but about her." Janelle looked down at her belly. "Yes," she said, without hesitation. "I'm scared and worried about money and how I'm going to manage everything. But yes, I'm happy. She's going to be loved so much, Luke. No matter what happens between us, She's going to know she was wanted. Luke felt his eyes fill with tears. I want to be a good father to her. You will be, Janelle said. I can see it in your face when you look at her picture. You're already falling in love. I fell in love the moment you told me she existed. They drove to Janelle's new apartment building together. It wasn't much to look at from the outside, a plain brick building near the airport where planes flew overhead every few minutes. But inside, Janelle had made her small studio feel like home with plants and colorful pillows and the guitar stand in the corner. It's nice, Luke said, looking around. Cozy. It's tiny, Janelle laughed. But it's mine. Well, mine and hers. She patted her belly. About that, Luke said carefully. I know you want to be independent, and I respect that. But I'd like to help with expenses. Baby, things are expensive. Janelle had been dreading this conversation. Luke, I don't want your money. It's not my money. It's our daughter's money. For her crib, her car seat, her clothes. Luke's voice was gentle but firm. Please let me help. Janelle sat down on her small couch. She had been so focused on proving she could do this alone that she hadn't thought about what was best for the baby. Okay, she said finally, but I want us to pick everything out together. I don't want you just writing checks. I'd love that, Luke said, sitting down beside her. I've been researching cribs online. Did you know they make them that convert into toddler beds? Despite herself, Janelle laughed. You've been researching cribs? Cribs, car seats, strollers, baby monitors. Luke looked embarrassed. I may have gone a little overboard. Show me, Janelle said. Luke pulled out his phone and showed her a list he had made of baby items, complete with reviews and price comparisons. Janelle scrolled through it, amazed at how thorough he had been. Luke, this is incredibly sweet, but we don't need a $300 baby monitor that connects to our phones. But what if she stops breathing and we don't hear her? Then we'll hear her when she starts crying because she's hungry. Luke laughed at himself. I'm going to be one of those nervous fathers, aren't I? Probably, Janelle said, but that's okay. Better nervous than absent. They spent the afternoon going through Luke's research and making a more reasonable list. Janelle made sandwiches, and they ate lunch sitting on her floor with baby websites open on his laptop. It felt normal, domestic, like they were already a family. I should probably go, Luke said when the afternoon sun started to fade. I don't want to overstay my welcome. Luke, Janelle said as he was putting on his jacket, would you like to come to dinner Sunday? Tasha's cooking, and she wants to meet you properly. Luke's face lit up. Oh, I'd love that. After he left, Janelle sat on her couch with her hand on her belly. For the first time in months, she felt hopeful about the future. Meanwhile, across town, Margaret Hastings sat in her office, staring at the ultrasound photo Luke had left on her desk that morning. She had told him she didn't want to see it, but he had left it anyway. The baby looked like Luke had when he was born. The same profile, the same stubborn little chin. Margaret had carried that photo in her wallet for 30 years until it was soft and faded from handling. Her assistant knocked on the door. Mrs. Hastings? Your appointment with the wedding planner is here. About the Christmas gala. Cancel it, Margaret said without looking up from the ultrasound photo. Ma'am? Cancel the Christmas gala. Cancel all the events for the next month. Her assistant looked confused but nodded and left. Margaret had been thinking about her conversation with Luke every day for 3 weeks. She had been thinking about the choice between her expectations and her son's happiness. She had been thinking about the possibility of losing him forever, and she had been thinking about the baby in the photo on her desk, her granddaughter. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in months. Reverend Cole? She said when he answered. This is Margaret Hastings. I need to talk to someone about forgiveness. Sunday dinner at Tasha's apartment was a small, warm affair. Tasha had made her famous fried chicken, mac and cheese, and green beans that had been cooking slowly all day. The tiny dining table was set with mismatched plates and cloth napkins she had ironed specially for the occasion. Luke arrived with flowers for Tasha and sparkling cider for Janelle. He looked nervous but eager to make a good impression. So you're the one who broke my sister's heart, Tasha said by way of greeting, but her tone was more teasing than hostile. I'm the one who's trying to put it back together, Luke replied. Tasha studied him for a moment, then smiled. Good answer. Come on in. Dinner was delicious and comfortable. Luke asked Tasha about her classes at the community college. She told him about her dream of becoming a nurse. He told stories about growing up in Charleston that made both sisters laugh. "You're not what I expected," Tasha admitted as they were clearing the dishes. "What did you expect?" Luke asked. "Someone more stuck up, someone who would look down on us." Luke was quiet for a moment. "My mother would have looked down on you," he said honestly. "I was raised to think that way too. But Janelle taught me that the size of someone's heart matters more than the size of their bank account." After dinner, Tasha excused herself to study, leaving Luke and Janelle alone on the small balcony. The Charleston skyline glittered in the distance, and a warm breeze carried the scent of jasmine. "I like your sister," Luke said. "She likes you too. I can tell because she didn't threaten to hurt you if you break my heart again. Would she really do that? Tasha once chased a boy 3 blocks with a baseball bat because he stood me up for prom," Janelle said with a straight face. Luke's eyes widened. "Remind me to stay on her good side." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights. Janelle's hand rested on her belly, and she could feel the baby moving inside her. "Luke," she said softly, "I've been thinking about us, about what happens next. And I'm not ready to be your girlfriend again. Not yet." She held up her hand when he started to speak. "But I'm ready to be your friend, your partner in raising our daughter." Luke nodded. "That's more than I hoped for. And I want you to know that I forgive you, for disappearing, for the wedding, for all of it. I understand why it happened, and I forgive you." Luke felt tears sting his eyes. "Thank you. But Luke, if you disappear on me again, if you let your mother or anyone else come between us and our daughter, I won't give you another chance." "I won't," he said firmly. "I promise you, I won't." Janelle looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay." The next morning, Luke was in his office reviewing contracts when his secretary announced that his mother was there to see him. Margaret walked in looking uncharacteristically uncertain. She was still perfectly dressed and poised, but something in her face was different. "I went to see Reverend Cole," she said without preamble. Luke looked up from his papers. "Oh?" "We had a long talk about pride, about love, about what it means to be a family." Margaret sat down in the chair across from his desk. "I've been thinking about what you said, about not being part of your granddaughter's life. And I don't want that, Luke. You're my only child." "This baby is my only grandchild." Margaret's voice was quiet and strained. "I may not understand your choices, but I love you, and I want to be part of your life." Luke set down his pen and really looked at his mother. For the first time in years, she looked vulnerable. "What are you saying, Mom?" "I'm saying I'd like to meet Janelle properly, not as the woman who ruined your wedding, but as the woman you love, as the mother of my granddaughter." Luke felt hope bloom in his chest, but he was cautious. "She won't make it easy for you. You hurt her badly at the wedding." "I know, and I want to apologize for that." Margaret paused. "Reverend Cole reminded me that redemption is possible for everyone, even stubborn old women who think they know what's best for their children." "You're not old," Luke said with a small smile. "I'm old enough to know better," Margaret replied. "Will you ask her if she'd be willing to have coffee with me? Just the two of us." Luke studied his mother's face. "Are you sure about this? Because if you hurt her again—" "I won't," Margaret said firmly. "I promise you, I won't." That afternoon, Janelle was organizing the nursery corner of her studio apartment when her phone rang. Luke's name appeared on the screen. "Hi," she answered. "Hi, how are you feeling?" "Good. The baby's been moving around a lot today. I think she's going to be a dancer." Luke's voice was warm with pleasure. "Really? Can you feel her kicking?" "All the time now. She's most active in the evenings." Janelle paused. "Luke, there's something different in your voice. What's going on?" "My mother came to see me today." "Oh." Janelle's voice got careful and guarded. "She wants to meet with you, to apologize." Janelle was quiet for so long that Luke wondered if the call had dropped. "Janelle, are you there?" "I'm here. I'm just processing." "You don't have to say yes." "I told her I'd ask, but the decision is yours." Janelle sat down on her couch, her hand automatically going to her belly. The baby kicked as if responding to her mother's stress. "What do you think I should do?" she asked. "I think," Luke said carefully, "that she's trying to change, and I think our daughter deserves to have a grandmother who loves her. But But I also think you should trust your instincts. If this feels wrong to you, don't do it. Janelle thought about all the angry words Margaret had said at the wedding, the way she had looked at Janelle like she was nothing, the coldness in her voice when she asked how much money it would take to make her go away. But she also thought about Luke's face when he talked about his mother. Despite everything, he loved her. And this baby was going to be Margaret's granddaughter, whether they all got along or not. "Okay," she said finally, "I'll meet with her, but somewhere public. And you have to promise me that if she says one cruel thing, I'm walking away." "Absolutely," Luke said. "Thank you for giving her this chance." "I'm not doing it for her," Janelle said. "I'm doing it for our daughter. And for you." 2 days later, Janelle sat in the cafe at the Charleston Museum, nervously smoothing her dress over her growing belly. She had chosen this place because it was public but quiet, and because the museum felt neutral. It belonged to the whole city, not to any one social class. Margaret arrived exactly on time, wearing a simple grey suit and looking as nervous as Janelle felt. She ordered tea and sat down across from the younger woman. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "Thank you for coming," Margaret said finally. "I almost didn't," Janelle replied honestly. "I wouldn't have blamed you if you hadn't." Margaret looked down at her hands. "I owe you an apology, Janelle. Several apologies, actually." Janelle waited. "I was wrong to have your calls blocked. I was wrong to speak to you the way I did at the wedding. I was wrong to try to keep you and Luke apart." Margaret's voice was steady but pained. "I was protecting what I thought was best for my son, but I was really just protecting my own expectations." "You hurt me," Janelle said quietly. "Not just at the wedding, but before that. Luke told me things you said about me, about people like me." Margaret's face flushed with shame. "I said terrible things. Things I was taught to think were acceptable, but that I know are wrong. Why should I believe you've changed?" Margaret was quiet for a long moment. "Because I realized that I was about to lose my son over my own prejudice. Because I saw the ultrasound photo of my granddaughter and fell in love with her before I even met her. And because Reverend Cole reminded me that grace means giving people chances they don't deserve." She reached into her purse and pulled out the ultrasound photo, now creased from handling. "I've been carrying this for a week," she said. "She looks like Luke did when he was born, but she has your nose." Despite herself, Janelle felt her anger starting to soften. Luke said the same thing. "I know I can't undo what I said or what I did," Margaret continued, "but I'd like to try to build something new. If you'll let me." Janelle studied the older woman's face. Margaret looked, smaller somehow, less imposing than she had at the wedding, more human. "What exactly are you asking for?" Janelle said. "A chance to be part of my granddaughter's life. A chance to get to know the woman my son loves." Margaret's voice got softer. "A chance to be a better person than I've been." Janelle put her hand on her belly, feeling the baby move. This little girl was going to be part of both their worlds, whether it was easy or not. "I can't promise we'll be friends," Janelle said, "and I won't let you treat me like I'm not good enough, ever again. I understand, but I'm willing to try. For her." Janelle looked down at her belly. "For Luke, and maybe even for you." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." They talked for another hour, carefully but honestly. Margaret asked about Janelle's family, her work, her dreams for the future. Janelle asked about Luke as a child, about the family traditions their daughter might inherit. When they parted, they didn't hug, but they shook hands, and Margaret's grip was warm and genuine. "Janelle," she said as they walked toward their cars, "would you and Luke like to come to dinner next Sunday? I'd like to cook for you." Janelle was surprised. "You cook?" "I used to, before I got so caught up in social obligations. I think it's time I remembered how." That evening, Luke called Janelle as soon as his mother told him about their meeting. "How did it go?" he asked anxiously. "Better than I expected," Janelle admitted. "She actually seemed sorry, really sorry. She is. I can see it in her face." Luke's voice was hopeful. "Does this mean you'll give her a chance?" "We're having dinner at her house Sunday." Luke was quiet for a moment. "Are you sure you're ready for that?" "No," Janelle laughed. "But I figure if I can survive crashing your wedding, I can survive dinner with your mother." "I love you," Luke said suddenly. The words hung in the air between them. It was the first time he had said it since they had been trying to rebuild their relationship. "Luke." Janelle started. I know you're not ready to say it back, he said quickly. I just needed you to know. I love you, and I love our daughter, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving that you can trust me. Janelle felt tears spring to her eyes. Ask me again in a few months. I will, he said. I'll keep asking until you're ready to say yes. Sunday dinner at the Hastings house was a revelation. Margaret had cooked everything herself, pot roast and mashed potatoes and green beans that reminded Janelle of her grandmother's cooking. The formal dining room had been abandoned in favor of the smaller breakfast nook, which felt warmer and more intimate. Margaret asked thoughtful questions about Janelle's music and listened with genuine interest to the stories about her childhood. She told funny stories about Luke as a little boy that made him blush and made Janelle laugh. He once tried to give a concert in the backyard, Margaret said, smiling at the memory. He was about 7, and he had set up all his stuffed animals as an audience. He charged me $1 to watch him sing Happy Birthday to his teddy bear. I was practicing for Carnegie Hall, Luke protested. You were adorable, his mother said. Just like you still are when you get passionate about something. As the evening went on, Janelle began to see where Luke had gotten his kindness and his sense of humor. Margaret, when she wasn't trying to control everyone around her, was actually quite charming. After dinner, Margaret brought out a box of photo albums. I thought you might like to see some pictures of Luke growing up, she said to Janelle, for the baby book. They spent an hour looking through photos. Luke as a gap-toothed first grader, Luke in his high school graduation gown, Luke at various family gatherings, always smiling, always surrounded by people who loved him. He's going to be a wonderful father, Margaret said quietly. He's patient and kind, just like his dad was. Tell me about Luke's father, Janelle said. Margaret's face grew soft. David was the love of my life. He was gentle and funny, and he never let my family's expectations change who he was. She looked at Luke. You're very much like him. I wish I could have met him, Janelle said. He would have loved you, Margaret said. He always said I was too worried about what other people thought. He would have told me to welcome you with open arms from the beginning. When it was time to leave, Margaret walked them to the door. Janelle, she said, would you like to go shopping for baby things this week? I know you and Luke have been planning to do that, but I thought perhaps I could join you, if you wouldn't mind. Janelle looked at Luke, who nodded encouragingly. I'd like that, she said, but no $300 baby monitors. Margaret laughed. I'll try to restrain myself. As they drove home, Luke reached over and took Janelle's hand. How are you feeling about all this? He asked. Good, Janelle said, and she was surprised to realize she meant it. Really good. Your mother is different than I expected. She's different than she's been in years, Luke said. You've changed her. This baby has changed her. Maybe we've all changed a little. They drove in comfortable silence for a while, hands linked, both thinking about how much their lives had transformed in just a few months. Luke, Janelle said as they pulled up to her apartment building, I have something to tell you. He looked concerned. Is everything okay? Everything's perfect, she said, smiling. I love you too. Luke's face broke into the biggest smile she had ever seen. Really? Really? I think I've loved you all along, even when I was angry at you, even when I thought I'd lost you forever. He leaned over and kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. So what happens now? He asked against her lips. Now we figure out how to be a family, Janelle said. All of us, you and me, and our daughter, and even your mother. I can't wait, Luke said. Neither can I. 6 months later, Harmony Elizabeth Hastings was born on a sunny Charleston morning. She had Luke's dark hair and Janelle's beautiful eyes, and she was perfect. Luke held her while Janelle rested, talking to his tiny daughter in a soft voice about all the things he was going to teach her. How to throw a baseball, how to drive a car, how to stand up for what she believed in. Margaret arrived that afternoon with flowers and tears in her eyes. She held her granddaughter with gentle hands and whispered promises about the stories she would tell her and the places they would go together. Tasha took 100 photos and immediately started planning the baby's first birthday party. That evening, when the visitors had gone home and Harmony was sleeping peacefully in her bassinet, Luke and Janelle sat together in the hospital bed. She's so beautiful, Janelle whispered. Just like her mother, Luke said. Are you scared? Janelle asked. Terrified, Luke admitted, but also excited. We're going to be good parents, aren't we? The best, Janelle said confidently. Luke pulled out a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. I know this isn't the most romantic place to do this, he said, but I can't wait another minute. Janelle's eyes widened as he opened the box, revealing a simple, beautiful diamond ring. Janelle Brooks, he said, you are the strongest, kindest, most amazing woman I've ever known. You've made me a better man, and you've given me the most precious gift in the world. Will you marry me? Janelle looked at the ring, then at their sleeping daughter, then at the man who had fought his way back into their lives. Yes, she said, tears streaming down her face. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Luke slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her deeply. In her bassinet, Harmony stirred and made a small sound, as if she approved. 1 year later, they were married in the garden behind Melody's cafe, surrounded by friends and family and the people who had believed in their love story from the beginning. Janelle wore her grandmother's dress, altered to fit her perfectly. Luke wore a simple grey suit and the biggest smile in South Carolina. Margaret walked Harmony down the aisle as the flower girl, both of them giggling as rose petals scattered around their feet. Reverend Cole performed the ceremony, speaking about second chances and the power of forgiveness and love that grows stronger through adversity. When they kissed as husband and wife, the small crowd cheered, and Harmony clapped her tiny hands from her grandmother's arms. Later, at the reception, Janelle sang At Last, while Luke held their daughter and swayed to the music. It was the same song she had sung the night they met, but now it meant something different. Now it meant they were home. Thank you, Luke whispered in her ear as they danced. For what? For crashing my wedding, he said with a grin. Best thing that ever happened to me. Janelle laughed and kissed him under the string lights while their family and friends celebrated around them. Sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with the most dramatic moments. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find what really matters. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, love really does conquer all. In their small house near the water, surrounded by music and laughter and the sweet chaos of raising a child, Luke and Janelle built the life they had always dreamed of. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. And it was more than enough.